For months, astronomers have tracked 3I Atlas, the crimson interstellar giant whose vast plasma envelope has already bent predictions and challenged everything we thought we knew about cosmic visitors. It pulsed like a heartbeat every 84 seconds, glowing brighter with each passing week, until scientists began to suspect it was more than just a drifting comet. Now, those suspicions have turned into fear, because for the first time in history, Earth's magnetic field, the invisible shield that guards us from the fury of the sun and the violence of the cosmos, has begun to respond. Magnetometers across the globe have recorded sudden jolts of energy, auroras have spilled far beyond the poles, and satellites have reported inexplicable surges that match the exact rhythm of 3I Atlas. The shield has been touched, and scientists fear this is only the beginning of something far greater. At first, the anomalies were dismissed as noise, slight fluctuations in magnetic readings, glitches in satellites, brief surges on power lines. But then the pattern revealed itself. Every 84 seconds, the same interval as the crimson pulse of 3I Atlas, global magnetometers spiked in unison, as if the entire planet were being struck by an invisible hammer. These were not isolated local disturbances. They were synchronized worldwide, affecting systems thousands of miles apart at the same moment. Soon after, auroras began appearing in skies unaccustomed to their glow, painting latitudes as far south as France, Japan, and parts of the United States with shimmering curtains of green, red, and violet. Airline pilots reported navigation errors, while ground crews noticed their compasses drifting off course before snapping back. The truth was undeniable. Earth's magnetic field, normally stable and predictable, was vibrating in harmony with something far beyond it, something vast, pulsing, and interstellar. The magnetosphere is Earth's first and last line of defense. It bends the solar wind around us, protecting our fragile atmosphere from being stripped away, shielding our power grids and satellites from collapse. But under the influence of 3I Atlas, that shield began to fracture. Data from the European Space Agency's swarm satellites revealed temporary cracks in the magnetic field, openings through which streams of charged particles surged unchecked. These breaches ignited auroras so powerful they were visible from cities bathed in artificial light, where the skies had been dark for centuries. On the ground, electrical grids strained under geomagnetically induced currents, with transformers humming and overheating. In the oceans, submarine communication cables experienced interference so precise it seemed timed with the comet's pulse. Earth's defenses were no longer holding steady. They were shuddering, quivering like glass beginning to crack under pressure. And everyone knew what happens when resonance reaches its breaking point. The first signs that human technology was faltering came from orbit. Satellites reported sudden spikes in radiation not accounted for by solar storms. Instruments filled with patterned static, strange bursts that repeated in intervals too exact to dismiss. Amateur radio operators on Earth picked up ghostly signals bleeding into frequencies that should have been silent, bursts that seemed to mimic the cadence of 3I Atlas itself. It was as if our machines, like our planet, had begun to echo the pulse of the visitor. Engineers at ground stations were baffled. The satellites were not simply being disrupted, they were resonating, amplifying the interference as though turned into unwilling repeaters. Some whispered that what had silenced Voyager 2 after its encounter with the object was now creeping inward, spreading across Earth's orbit. Our machines, built to observe the universe, were being turned into conduits for something we could not control, or even fully understand. By the time the anomalies became impossible to ignore, the scientific community had shifted from skepticism to dread. If an object millions of miles away could trigger Earth's magnetic field, then distance was no protection. The shield we trusted to guard our world had proven vulnerable to resonance from beyond the stars. And this was only the beginning. If the crimson pulse of 3I Atlas continued to intensify, what would happen when its influence reached full strength? Could the magnetosphere collapse, exposing Earth to a storm of radiation that would cripple satellites, blind communications, and devastate power grids? Could the resonance reach deeper, into the molten core that drives the field itself, destabilizing it permanently? The questions multiplied, but the answers remained locked behind silence, as agencies released carefully worded statements while quietly classifying the most disturbing data. What had begun as a strange comet sighting had now become a planetary threat, and the fear was no longer about what 3I Atlas was. It was about what it was doing and what it was preparing to do next. While scientists focused on the sky, the oceans began to whisper their own warning. Deep-sea buoys across the Pacific recorded sudden, unexplained shifts in pressure, as if invisible waves were passing through the deep. Tide gauges along the Atlantic coast rose and fell by centimeters in rhythms that matched the pulse of 3I Atlas, completely out of sync with the moon's gravitational pull. Even more disturbing were microseisms, faint vibrations caused by ocean waves crashing against the shore, which began to repeat in exact harmony with the comet's 84-second beat. Fishermen off the coast of South America reported vast blooms of bioluminescent plankton glowing in pulsating patterns across the night sea, as if the water itself had been synchronized to the visitor's rhythm. The oceans, which govern Earth's climate and weather systems, seem to have become amplifiers of the resonance already recorded in the skies. If the seas themselves had begun to echo 3I Atlas, then storms and currents could soon carry its influence into every corner of the planet. As if the Earth's trembling shield were not enough, the sun itself appeared to join the dialogue. By early October, its surface boiled with over 170 sunspots, each one a potential birthplace of violent storms. On October 4th, it unleashed a massive M-class flare, its coronal mass ejection blasting straight toward the path of 3I Atlas. Instead of destabilizing the object, the interaction only seemed to strengthen it. Observatories recorded the comet's coma swelling, glowing brighter and twisting into spirals of plasma, as though it were absorbing the solar storm rather than being torn apart by it. Some described it as a duel, the sun roaring, the comet responding, but others saw something more troubling. What if this wasn't a duel at all? What if it was a conversation, a resonance between star and visitor, with Earth caught helplessly between them? If the sun itself could be bent into synchrony with 3I Atlas, then our world's magnetic field was not just threatened, it was already compromised. Faced with growing panic, historians turned to the past, and what they found only deepened the fear. Ancient Chinese records described red broom stars that appeared in the heavens before great earthquakes shook the land. Babylonian tablets spoke of torches in the sky that were followed by floods and famine. Medieval chroniclers told of comets whose light pulsed like a heartbeat, heralding plague and the collapse of empires. For centuries, these stories had been dismissed as superstition, the fears of civilizations that lacked the tools of science. But now, as 3I Atlas pulsed crimson and Earth's shield vibrated in step, those warnings seemed less like myths and more like memory. Perhaps our ancestors had witnessed similar visitors before, resonances that shook Earth into chaos. Perhaps history was not imagination at all, but testimony we had ignored until it was too late. And yet, as the evidence mounted, the institutions we trusted grew quieter. NASA released carefully worded statements, speaking of magnetic variability and routine anomalies, avoiding any mention of 3I Atlas. ESA's reports were stripped of detail, replacing complex data with simplified summaries. Magnetometer logs that once updated in real time now appeared delayed or incomplete. Meanwhile, leaks from within whispered of emergency meetings, classified data, and warnings delivered only behind closed doors. The louder the cosmos roared, the quieter human institutions became. For many, this silence was confirmation. The truth was too disruptive to say aloud. If Earth's shield was already resonating with something from interstellar space, then what more terrifying revelations might come next? The comet's crimson glow burned above us every night, its pulse reaching deeper into our planet with every beat. And all the while, the voices meant to protect us fell into silence. As magnetometers spiked and auroras danced in skies unaccustomed to their glow, geophysicists began to notice something far more unsettling: subtle changes in Earth's rotation and the flow of its molten core. Normally, the planet's magnetic field is generated by the slow churning of liquid iron within, a dynamo that has remained stable for millennia. But in early October, anomalies appeared. Minute deviations in the length of a day, fractions of milliseconds, coincided with the 84-second rhythm of 3I Atlas. Seismic instruments detected vibrations not caused by tectonic shifts, but by pulses echoing through the planet's interior, as if Earth itself were being shaken from within by an invisible hand. These weren't random tremors. They were in sync with the crimson visitor. If the resonance reached deeper into the core, it could destabilize the very generator of the magnetic shield itself. Earth's defenses would not just falter. They could collapse entirely, leaving the planet exposed to radiation and storms on a scale humanity has never endured. By mid-October, the fear was no longer confined to scientific circles. Reports of strange lights in the sky, electrical surges, and compasses drifting began to flood social media, fueling speculation that officials refused to confirm. Yet behind the scenes, leaked memos revealed a far more alarming truth. Agencies already anticipated the possibility of a global magnetic disturbance event, a storm capable of crippling satellites, shutting down power grids, and disrupting navigation worldwide. And the source of this threat was not the sun alone, but the resonance of 3I Atlas bending the field of Earth into unnatural rhythms. The comet's glow now burned crimson and steady, brighter with every passing night, as though it were watching the world it had already begun to shake. And the terrifying question lingered. If this was only the beginning, what would happen when 3I Atlas reached the peak of its influence? Scientists were no longer debating whether the shield had been touched. They were asking how much longer it could endure before it finally broke. For centuries, humanity believed its shield was invincible. The magnetic field was a silent guardian, bending the solar wind, deflecting cosmic storms, and holding the fragile atmosphere in place. But now, under the influence of a crimson visitor from beyond the stars, that guardian has been touched, jolted, and bent into rhythms that do not belong to Earth. From the auroras bleeding into unfamiliar skies, to the oceans pulsing with invisible waves, to the trembling of Earth's molten core itself, every sign points to a terrifying truth. Our shield is no longer our own. It is resonating with something far greater, something that should not have the power to reach us. And yet it does. And this is only the beginning. 3I Atlas grows brighter with every passing night, its pulse stronger, its influence deeper. If the field continues to fracture, the consequences could be catastrophic. Satellites blinded, power grids crippled, communications silenced, and the planet left exposed to the raw fury of the sun. Humanity would not simply lose its shield. It would lose its safety, its stability, and perhaps even its future. The most chilling part of all is the silence. Institutions soften their words, agencies withhold their data, and the voices we look to for reassurance grow quieter as the evidence mounts. They know what we now suspect. 3I Atlas is not just passing through. It is changing everything it touches. And Earth, caught in its rhythm, has already begun to fall in step. The shield has been breached. The question is no longer if it will hold, but how long it can survive, and what happens when it finally breaks.